somebody asked me what were my objectives as a speaker right after lunch, and I said I want to see more eyeballs than eyelids. So if you would help me out, please, I'd appreciate that. I wanted to read you a poem to start things off. This is by did I do something here? There we go. This is by a former or late resource economist, Kenneth Boulding, the only man ever to head both the American Economics Association and the American Psychological Association. So if you think the economy is driving you crazy, Mr. Boulding got there first. And so he wrote an ode on the general subject of water. Water is far from a simple commodity. Water is a sociological oddity. Water is a pasture for science to forage in. Water is a mark of our dubious origin. Water is a link with a distant futurity. Water is a symbol of ritual purity. Water is politics. Water is religion. Water is just about anyone's pigeon. Water is frightening. Water is endearing. Water is a lot more than mere engineering. Water is tragical. Water is comical. Water is far from the pure economical. So discussions of water, though free from aridity, are apt to produce a good deal of turbidity. So that's what Mr. Boulding has to say on the subject of water. And I think you'll agree from all of your experience and the discussions today that there's a lot of truth there as well. So, I did it again. There we go. So I wanted to talk to you, and I always like to give the takeaways first. So that way, if you in fact do want to take a little snooze right after lunch, you'll at least know what the talk was about and can discuss it intelligently with your friends afterwards. So a couple of key takeaways. First of all, in the green building world, water is the next big thing. The bottom line is we figured out energy. We can now design zero net energy buildings pretty much everywhere in North America. So we figured that one out. And they're economical even. So now water is the next big subject to be tackled. The second sort of takeaway point is that we can use stuff that's happened all around the world, particularly in places like Australia, Israel, Netherlands, Germany, to inform what we do here. In fact, I live in Arizona, so drip irrigation is a big thing there. And as many of you know, the Israelis invented that 50 years ago to handle the same set of issues, a very dry climate and water's scarce. The third is, as we're all sort of gathered here to sort of find out about, there's a lot of opportunities there for all kinds of operations, manufacturers, service firms, entrepreneurs, designers, etc. So there's a lot of chances here to do good work and also to make good money. And when I wrote my book, Dry Run, I was very interested in trying to find the niche about urban water crisis. And obviously, we all know the sort of subject of water, the sort of idea that water is going to be the oil of the 21st century. It's going to be the source of a lot of money and a lot of conflict, that fresh water is inherently limited, that water footprints of cities and industries are much larger than the actual water use. Global warming is having a huge impact over time on water supplies. We're seeing that in the Southwest. The Colorado River, on which 7 southwestern states depends, is pretty reliably projected to have 10 to 15% less annual flows over the next few decades than we have today. And what we have today is less than what we had when it was all allocated. So we've got all these kind of issues about the easily available water, the surface water. Water and energy are also intimately connected. I've seen research from Sandia National Labs that basically says, hey, if you go out 15 years, project current trends in energy and water use, there's not enough water for energy production, not enough energy for water production and treatment. So we're going to hit the wall at some point in the next 10 to 15 years on both water and energy together. And what's interesting, of course, is that neither of these are planned with each other in mind. So if you look at our institutional arrangements, our planners, the energy planners are off on one side, electric utilities, natural gas companies. The water guys are over here, mostly municipal operations. They never think to talk to each other. And yet they have this intimate connection, the water-energy nexus. We also know that the U.S. is very drought-prone. And one of the things I could recommend, if you don't do it already, is just to sign up for Google Alerts and look under water conservation as a topic. And you will see that in this year alone, there have been water emergencies, not just in the usual suspect places, Texas, the Southwest, but in places like Massachusetts, Michigan. There's not because there's not enough water around, but because infrastructure is inadequate to the task. So we have to deal with droughts all the way from Florida and Georgia, wet regions, all the way to dry regions like the Southwest. In 2009, California was basically in lockdown for water shortages. So we're going to be faced more and more with water as a huge issue, as a cost issue. And I was talking to some people last night. I said, we could solve all these problems easily, but we don't have the money for infrastructure. So I think that water planning at the municipal level, at the broad urban and industrial level, is going to really have to revert to least cost thinking, to sustainability thinking, to sort of lean manufacturing thinking in a way that has never been done before, because we simply cannot build the infrastructure for legal, political reasons as well as economic reasons. And finally, therefore, that water conservation and reuse become vital pieces of any water solution. I looked at San Diego County as one of the case studies for my book. And San Diego County is supposed to increase population by a third over the next 20 years, add another 1 million people. San Diego is at the end of the pipeline. They're at the end of the straw. And they are in real trouble. And so when you actually look at the current plans, water reuse and conservation are the main sources of new, quote, supply in San Diego County, which is the second or third largest county in California, one of the largest in the U.S. So we're going to see lots of opportunities, but more importantly, you recall the statement from the current mayor of Chicago, Mr. Obama's first chief of staff, that never let a good crisis go to waste, right? We're going to see opportunities to do things, to change paradigms, to leapfrog approval processes that might have taken a decade or two before. We're going to see these kind of emergencies drive people to do things that they would not have thought of doing even 5 years ago. And so I think for people in business, this is a great opportunity time to actually get in and present new ideas to places and institutions that you would have written off before. Simply, they'll never change the way they do things. The fact of the matter is they are being forced to. Even Las Vegas, 300 gallons per person per day, 3 inches of rainfall a year. Try to make the math work. Las Vegas will pay you $1.50 a square foot to take out your lawn and replace it with desert landscaping. So they're doing everything they can to take their per capita use down to 150 gallons per person per day, which is the current U.S. average. They're still only going to have 3 inches of rain. But they're in a world of hurt. They could easily disappear in 50 years as a city and be about where they were in 1946 when Bugsy Siegel of the Chicago mob found them. So you could see, if you snooze long enough, you might just not miss anything about Las Vegas. So, well, let's talk about green buildings, because that's the ostensible reason for me to cavort up here after your lunch. Basically, green buildings have acquired in new construction about 20%, 25% market share, going up every year. 30,000 projects that are registered under the LEED system, in other words, seeking a green certification, representing 9 billion square feet. Any number with a B is pretty large. And 9 billion, if you're in the metric system here, 900 million square meters. So this is a lot of stuff. 130 countries are now using the U.S. LEED system in place of their own or as their own system, including places like Brazil and India, as well as Canada and a number of other large countries. There are 12,000 projects certified, and the average size is about 110,000 square feet. So a tenth of a million square feet. So if you just kind of do the math, there's a lot of stuff out there as examples for others. And about 175,000 people have been accredited as professionals to do the lead evaluations or audits. And just give that number a little perspective, that's twice the membership of the American Institute of Architects. So if you want to think about it another way, twice as many people as are architects in the U.S. already know about the LEED system and have passed a test in it. So again, that creates the infrastructure for doing this stuff rapidly. Obviously, there's inhibiting forces. Water's still cheap. If you look at building operations, compare water to energy costs, water costs are 1/10 to 1/5 the cost of energy in building operations. So it hasn't gotten attention. What does get attention is when you can't get water for your building to operate it. So obviously people are thinking about it even though it's not a huge cost item. We still prefer high water use lifestyles. I was flying into Los Angeles on my way up here yesterday, and I grew up there, so it was no surprise. But just flying into LAX, you start at the Harbor Freeway and you go from out to the west side, you see one postage stamp lot after another, right? No one's doing anything with that green except watering it. It's not really serving a great purpose, but that is how we have developed. You go to Australia, I was in Sydney a couple weeks ago, Australians use roughly 150 liters a day per person instead of gallons. And they still, I think, have a viable country. They still have lots of beer to drink and other urban amenities. So we can do a lot more with less, and so that's sort of the opportunity now for designers is to figure out how to do this with a lot less water use. But there are also unintended consequences. The first thing that happens when you do a lot of water conservation is water agency revenues go down. The second thing that happens is that all of our sewage systems, which are designed for gravity flow to be self-scouring, you engineers out there, don't have as much water in them. The stuff doesn't move. Last year, San Francisco had to spend $14 million on bleach to take care of some of their sewer problems where the sewer wasn't moving. Of course, you could just run the fire hydrants and flush them out too, but that would kind of defeat the purpose. So there are unintended consequences of all this stuff. And so what I really believe is that we're just beginning to look at water and energy and cities as complete systems. And my slogan is it takes a system to replace a system. You can't just do it component by component. And so we're just beginning to sort of deal with this. And part of my presentation today will deal with how we're handling this at the building level.